Yeah, no, I remember. It's one of the Andrew moments. Now imagine the entire place is being swarmed with wolves. I'm like, yes, Andrew.
And then that night they came and shot the wolves. And that last wolf there is a CG wolf.
I love how it leaps and then it goes down.
These are real wolves. These are real wolves.
Those are actually real wolves.
In some of these shots, we've replaced their tails. They have CG tails. And the shot actually coming up when they're surrounding the beaver's house, they're all, basically the dogs, as soon as they were let go, they were just kind of like, whoopee, we can run. So they'd run around wagging their tails, and they didn't look very threatening. So we actually went through and did some CG tail replacement.
All of them but that one.
I think
that's the true sign of a perfectionist.
Do you think we need jam?
Only if the witch does toast.
That's, this is interesting. There's a CG wolf up the top there. There's a few CG tails. In the next shot that we're outside, there's a wolf digging at the window, and then in this shot here, the wolf at the top is CG, the bottom wolf is real. In this shot, the close wolf is CG and the others are real. So this is a real wolf, that's a CG wolf. That was one of the challenges, is to be able to cut from one to the other convincingly. Was so difficult.
It's amazing, it really is.
Bedroom me dug this. Comes up right near his place. You told me.
What I remember about this tunnel is this is the start of Anna's injuries.
Yeah, I had sort of war wounds.
You had a series
my
of them.
knees were seriously cut up. I think that's why my physical activity in the film was limited, because Andrew realised that every time I sort of ran anywhere, I managed to fall over.
Not very coordinated.
I remember when I was
seriously coordinated.
I remember when I was doing the thing where I fall down and I get up, and then I kept having to do it again and again and again, because you were like we want it a bit more rasping. That's too rasping. We want it a bit more urgent. Come on, urgency. And I was placing myself down, and then I got really annoyed and I was throwing myself down on the mat.
I have some great shots of you rolling your eyes at me and just flopping out of frame.
I'm so sorry, dear.
He was my best mate.
Well, this scene was really sad. I found when we were doing it, it was actually one of the most emotional scenes. And seeing all this, just this witch did all this. It's really, really devastating.
And that was, that's really appropriate. This is the moment, I think, where Peter actually starts taking the responsibility seriously. This is where the character starts realizing that this isn't just a fantasy. It really is life and death for these guys, and the story starts having some weight. The other interesting thing in the scene coming up is, and you guys, I think, noticed this the other day, the scene around the fire with the fox is actually completely different from the scene we shot.
Yeah, totally.
We changed all the dialogue of the CG characters.
I can't believe how much the script has changed since we actually filmed it. I mean,
Yeah.
I wondered whether you had to CG any of our acting in it, Andrew.
All the way through the movie. Skandar isn't actually real.
Well, there's me, there's Samaya, and
Yes, exactly. He's a composite of so many different
And
things.
Will.
Where are the fugitives?
When you do all this, Andrew, it's to capture that this fox is really, really trying to protect them, and it's really, really sad, and it's conveying all those emotions on the CG characters' faces. Is that difficult?
I think it's definitely one of the big challenges, and it's what really good animation does is you start with the voice and you start with the internal thoughts of the character, and an animator's job is really to convey it. I mean, I think of animators as actors. I mean, they're doing the same job as actors do, which is taking an emotion, taking a thought, owning it, and then showing it to the audience in a way that the audience can understand it. And I think we had some really, really great animators on this show, and that's why the characters are so expressive and emotional.
Thank you for your kindness, but I'm afraid that's all the cure I have time for.
Two things are really funny in this, quite funny in this scene. One is Mrs. Beaver, because I think that in this scene, Mrs. Beaver feels very important, because of course she's attending to the fox's wounds, and so I think when she starts walking about afterwards, she develops what I call a Georgie wobble. which is like a proud
swagger.
wobble in her walk. It's, yeah, a bit like a swagger.
That's how I could tell the difference between Kaylee and you, is the swagger. Can anyone remember what the scene was about originally? I've honestly forgotten. I rewrote it so many times.
It was about that we wanted to go home, but I think before we shot it, it was originally that I wanted to go home, and at this point, Peter was prepared to stay.
Right.
And then when we filmed it, I think it changed to neither of us wanted to stay.
And then it became much more about Aslan, I think.
It was more about Aslan. Was that just because we hadn't heard that much about him in the story?
It was, and I wanted to kind of build him up as a character, and I still wanted all that weight and sense of responsibility, but I also wanted to introduce more of the idea of Aslan and more of the idea of what was going on in the world with this, looking for soldiers and all that kind of thing. So it was a scene that we could repurpose. I mean, I feel that's one of the great things about having CG characters, is you can change the scenes later on.
Yeah.
And also, the fox is totally pretty much your creation, wasn't it? It wasn't something that was in the book.
He's not really in the book as a character. He's they're having a picnic when the White Witch comes across them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to make it a more emotional moment when he gets turned to stone by getting to know him.
Yeah.
And particularly if he was somebody that helped the kids, then you were going to feel even more emotional about it, that he got turned to stone after he'd already helped our kids and we got to know him.
He's such a cool character as well, isn't he?
He is a great character. Even the casting of that character was funny, because I was actually doing another press junket for Shrek 2 and ran into Rupert, and he was like, "How come I'm not in your other movie?" And I was like, "Well, do you want to be?" And he goes, "Yes, what can I be?" And I was like, "Well, I think the only character left is a fox." He's like, "Okay, I'll be a fox." And he basically did the deal by the next day.
Wow.
I saw him in Cannes and he'd agreed to do the film.
Sorry, I've got to say now, turning towards this scene.
Yes, I've been trying to get towards the scene.
No, not about you, about James. I felt so sorry for him. I feel sorry for you as well. When you get hoisted up and your ankles are chained, I feel so sorry for you. And also, when you're just about to get stabbed, I feel really sorry for you. And also, I'll tell you in a minute.
It's like 1,000 alsos.
I'll tell you in a minute when we'll just.
I know what makes you feel sorry for James. It's this bit. That was actually that's the first moment in the movie that I think you suddenly realise that's really serious. Like, there's actually really violence in this world.
Yeah, it's really interesting with the violence though, because it's a bit shocking and it makes you kind of cringe and shudder, but there's no blood.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Hitchcock film in a lot of ways, Just like, you just have to leave it to the imagination, and like, there's definitely, like, you don't see James's face get whacked, you just sort of see the action.
There's a big acting moment for Skandar coming up, I always thought this was a big moment for you, where you're really starting to feel the weight of what you've done.
Yeah, me too.
It's actually when people start liking you.
Yay! So cool. The guy in the ogre behind James, who's so cool. He's called Joe. He's such a great guy. And then he put on his head. He'd be like, "Rawr, take it off, all right, mate."
Not only that, but he put on his head and he was completely blind.
Oh yeah.
He could only see when his mouth was open. So if the puppeteers didn't open the mouth while he was walking, he couldn't see where he was going. So it was kind of challenging.
But that's actually kind of realistic in the way that an ogre wouldn't be very well coordinated. An ogre might bump into.
They were so great in those suits, though. All the guys. I remember sometimes when we were filming the battle scenes, the guys in the really hot, heavy Minotaur suits would take their not their heads, the Minotaur heads off. And steam would be coming off the tops of their heads.
Yeah,
they were so hot.
Shane, he had this sort
Those
of
guys
like
were
a flame
amazing.
on top of his head.
They would and they would never complain ever. You would never hear like one complaint.
Oh yeah, no, he tripped. It's in the gag reel, and he has kind of some brace around his head to keep it so his head the Minotaur head doesn't wobble about, and he had a massive split chin.
I know, he did like 3 more takes.
And until anyone was like, "What, your chin?"
This is going to sound great. It's going to sound like I was just permanently injuring everybody on the crew.
It's the world, dear. Did you expect it to be small?
Smaller.
When you're ready. son of Adam.
Were these reindeer real, Andrew? Or were they,
No, we couldn't take any real reindeer into New Zealand because they carried a bovine disease that, although they weren't susceptible to it, all the cows in New Zealand were. So we couldn't take real ones in, so we had to use animatronic ones, and then in that case, CG ones.
I remember when I fell over when we started running.
I was running with Georgie and we were on a green screen. This is all green screen here, and I was holding her hand, running. Suddenly, she slips because maybe running too fast, and Georgie literally just flies on the ground.
I don't think you even noticed it.
I really didn't because she's so light and small. I was like, oh well.
I think this will bossy.
No! Behind you! It's her! Run!
That moment was high as well when I have to lift her up because in ADR you have to make that sound, of ugh.
That's right, because
And
you
I found
changed that line.
Yeah, that was so difficult.
The thing that I don't get is white reindeer. There's white reindeer legs, and there's actually brown reindeer.
Because they're covered in snow. So the idea, obviously we want people to believe that it's the White Witch chasing them. So what we did is we covered Father Christmas's reindeer in snow so that they looked like the White Witch's reindeer. If you look at them closely, they're not. You can see on those closer shots that there's sort of a dark fur under the snow. But when people are watching it, they don't really know.
But it's just like Andrew was like, run as fast as you can, and Will was like pelting, and I was like,
And any physical activity I relished just because there was so much standing around and so much just Richard moments.
Like this, for instance,
Exactly.
this kind of physical activity of hiding in a dark hole.
And looking up.
Wimping out.
This was a hard scene because you all had to be afraid, and there was just, it was just a whole bunch of people around you, and you're in a hole. The beavers weren't there. There's no one up above you. Although that shadow, that was Don McAlpine's trick.
Really?
That shadow of the White Witch, it was hard to get the shadow in the frame. So remember James, the little person?
Yeah.
He got James to cast the shadow because a tall person, the shadow was too long. So we got James, who was the little person, who was a stand-in for Karen and a stand-in for Georgie. And it was actually his shadow.
I turned out to be like 2 inches taller than James by the end of the
Yeah, well, because you kept growing.
Did you see Felicity's platforms? Because Felicity was my first
right.
level. She had the biggest platforms you've ever seen. They were so cool.
Oh, I love filming this scene. This was such a fun scene because I got to do my dagger, and it was actually a real steel dagger. And I didn't usually get to use my real steel dagger.
Remember when you guys came back from this, and we'd been apart, and I visited you on something else, and you guys just all got your gifts, and I remember. Rather sad. I was being.
You missed out on Christmas.
I was being quite
and then like and it was like one of those moments. Dum, 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 and then Skandar's like, "Hey!" When we've all got our weapons, it's like, "Hey!"
Narnia.
No. Not for a long time. But the hope.
For some reason, this scene feels very vivid. It doesn't seem like we even shot it that long ago. I remember doing a lot of the takes smiling, and then just doing a few pensive ones, but it just doesn't seem that long ago doing that.
Really?
Scene. Yeah,
the
really.
scene
too old.
The scene sticks out in my mind because I remember that there's this line at the end of it, "No more ice,"
No more
which
ice.
is probably the most said line in the entire
Literally.
film.
No more ice.
No more ice,
We're going to
definitely
have T-shirts made with no more ice.
And it was agony doing that. I'm not going to go any further than saying it was absolute agony. I've never done a line that seems so simple.
The funny thing was, for some reason, I had a specific idea of what that line was meant to sound like.
Yeah.
And until you said it exactly how I imagined it, it was like we just kept doing it. But I remember you were tired.
I know. It was about 8:30 or something.
The whole crew was just willing you to get it.
Please, no more ice. I think actually Pippa Hall, who's the cast director, was saying after we all saw the film that one of her favourite lines in the movie is when Georgie says to me, "Told you he was real."
It is a fun line.
Yeah.
And they actually used to be at the start of the scene.
Yeah, that's true.
We had to remove a sleigh that was behind her because she now says it after Father Christmas is already gone. Just because I don't know, it just played funnier at the end of the scene.
From this scene as well, just this bit right here. When I draw the sword, Anna's face I just think is fantastic because she just suddenly realizes, oh no,
Oh, great.
Just being handed that sword is
It's
just
a
like
boy with a sword.
exactly. She's like, okay, this is bad now. She's like, Father Christmas is here.
I must be off. Winter is almost over. And things do pile up when you've been gone 100 years. Long live Aslan.
James Cosmo was also just so great as Father Christmas. He just carried this great kudos, this sense of importance.
He
and
was so brilliant, and
gravitas,
also
yeah.
being, it looks snowy and cold, but we were actually in a hot studio, and he had
with green screen all around you.
so many layers
I
on,
know.
and that huge beard, and he must have been so hot.
Oh yeah, and Kieran, in some of our scenes, he had to wear a fat suit.
More ice.
I know is that the actual terminology?
Yeah.
Fat suit? Oh, he had to wear a fat suit. And basically that's just like, I don't know, like a foot of just pure
Insulation.
whatever, blubber, really. And he was sweating so much.
So here's the No More Ice, and actually this is like quite a big moment for me, I think, just because, like, it's the point where we stop listening to Susan or something, and it's the point for her as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
This was an intense scene. I remember
Yeah.
this because you ended up needing a lot of prep for this scene because you get so worked up, and then you were getting yourself really built into it so you could have this sort of the intensity of facing the wolves. And I remember Georgie coming to me. Actually, Georgie's grandparents came to me and saying, "Georgie's really terrified about the wolves." Remember that? And I was like, "Georgie, there are no wolves." And you're like, "No, I can see them in my mind."
Wait, maybe I should go first.
all this was a set as well, and the icebergs would move independently on hydraulics. So when we would step on them, they covered all the gaps. So when we step on each one, would move independently, and like water would come from above and below.
Yeah, no, water squirted up from between the icebergs, and I don't know whether it was because they were aiming or just because it was an accident, but I seemed to just get water up my skirt
It
every
was
shot.
an accident, but it
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
Andrew, literally
yeah.
with the
It
remote
did
control,
prompt
yeah.
some good screams, though.
Lots of squealing.
And it was actually really fun to shoot in a lot of ways. You know, I remember almost hyperventilating at the end of it because it was
The
just, like,
number
so
of different
intense.
angles on this. We must have shot this scene for a week in New Zealand, and I just remember thinking, what other angles can we do?
I remember you actually asking that. Are there any angles left to shoot? Well, part of it was because of all the coverage of the other animals too, and angles like that
Yeah.
where you're suddenly looking from the other animal's point of view. When we're shooting the scene, of course, they weren't there, so it just seemed like, oh, this was when you said, was I going to shoot your back in every scene?
Yeah, it became this joke that Andrew seemed... I couldn't work it out. I think right from the bit where we arrive at the Coombe train station, I never really understood why Andrew kept shooting our backs. I mean, I suddenly thought, well, what's all this back acting we're doing? But it was really a lot of the time for the CG characters and the stuff that wasn't there.
Take your family and go.
Look, just because some man in a red coat hands you a sword, it doesn't make you a hero.
I love it that Mr. Beaver goes like this.
I know that he's a real animal.
Because he's like he's trying to defend himself, but he's only a little beaver, so he goes like, "Wow!" and then like this huge big wolf just like jumps at him.
The funny thing about this is that William's getting all intense and everything, and that's me on my hands and knees saying, "What will it be, son of Adam?"
and then funny enough, like hold on to me, Georgie repeated like 100 single.
So many takes that we couldn't use because Georgie was lip syncing "Hold on to me."
Well,
then-
I learn everybody's lines. That's the thing I do. I learn everybody's lines, even though I
That's
don't
not
need
something
the
to be
cues.
proud of,
And
Georgie.
then speaking of injuries, that was also when William kept plonking you on the head with his shield.
Three times.
Oh, look at Will Pout, look at
so
Will Pout, look at
fun.
Will Pout. Did everyone see
I
that?
didn't pout, I was
Will
like-
pouted there. It
I
was
was
not
not pouting.
camera.
I was just
Rewind and
scared.
watch that. Will was pouting
I
there.
was not
That's
pouting.
easy for
You were
Skandar to
pouting.
say, who didn't have 12 tons of water dropped on him.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you can pout.
I mean, there's another bit when my hand comes out and the sword comes out. The sword comes out first, and then my hand comes out second. And this water was, we'd been in this tank for a week. And it was so disgusting. There was like wax and stuff, and every time I came out, I was gasping for air. And it turns out they didn't even use the shot with my head coming out, so I swallowed all that water for nothing.
What have you done? Lucy! Lucy!
The awful thing is that when we were filming that scene, I don't see why, but I had to be like tossing about in choppy waves for like about 5 minutes.
You loved it.
I
loved it.
loved
You
it,
never
yeah,
wanted to get out.
I was there, I was watching, and when they weren't rolling, you were going in and playing with sort of fluffy
I haven't
animals.
finished my story yet, actually, Mr. Keynes. Okay, so when we were doing that scene, I kept swallowing a lot of water, not as much as Will, but then Will's like a goldfish, and like and it was like, and I was just tossing about in these choppy waves.
Is the story going somewhere?
It's so warm out. I'll go and check the sleigh.
Your Majesty.
This was actually a fun scene to shoot, because this was actually a scene where Skandar got very emotional.
Yes, Andrew's now staring at me, expecting me to say something.
Well, it's true. I didn't ever think, it's like the beginning of the film. I didn't ever think we were going to be able to get you to cry.
And then I surprised him.
You did.
But no, I noticed because we did 2 takes, and one I just started crying, and the other I was really crying. And you only used the first one.
You just
No,
thought how much coke you've been banned over this film, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. I just told him you're not allowed to drink any more Coca-Cola for the rest of the film, and he just burst into tears.
Keeping Skandar off the sugar was actually quite a challenge. I don't know if you ever saw, but there were these catering trucks on set, and every day after lunch, Will and Skandar used to go into the...
Graham, it was me and Graham. No. Will had nothing to do with that. It was me and Graham. And one day we saw a massive, the huge packets with 24 cans. And I said to Graham, I bet you we can't get this back to our trailer. So we got it and we under our coats and we ran. It was so funny.
Oh no, that's not funny. Skandar, what made you cry? What happened? What?
I don't know if he wants to talk about it or not,
I'm
but
fine, really.
Basically,
What made you cry, Georgie?
Skandar told me a very emotional thing that had happened to him, and then while we were shooting this, I just sat off camera and basically retold him the same story. Told him what he had just told to me. And it's sad, actually. I wanted to stay on that shot longer when we come back to Skandar, because there's this great moment where this big tear rolls down. But based on the timing of the slap, I just couldn't stay on the shot long enough to keep it in the film. But I think it's very effective just to see that emotion come through in that one moment where Edmund really realizes, how much damage he's done.
And couldn't you have just had the second bit?
Well, I actually tried cutting back to it, and it seemed, once she said, if it's a war Aslan wants, it's war he shall get, I did cut back to Skandar and then to this scene, and it just felt like it was sort of not continuous at that stage.
Not actually use the first bit.
I should have got you into the edit suite.
No, not actually use the first.
No, I'm actually a co-director on this film.
Yeah, really.
No.
I don't know. Georgie should really have more credits.
Not actually. Not use the bit that you've used. Just use the second bit, which you haven't used.
No, because it was connected to when he was slapped, and Tilda hanging onto his face. It was tied into the timing of her letting go of his face. This was fun. This was in Oamaru.
It was such a fun scene to do because there was so much to look at. I mean, a lot of these creatures were put in digitally, but many of them were there, and it was such a tremendous spectacle seeing this camp and walking through it. And I think, again, all the detail that was on set, all of the sort of baskets of nuts and sort of fruit and just all these tents are gorgeous.
I remember asking Andrew, why do we need all of these details? Like in the tents, like I was just saying, it's like every single tent had something inside it that was Narnian, so to speak. I remember asking, and even like the bottom of the table legs had like Aslan's head on them, and it was absolutely amazing. I remember saying to Andrew, why, the audience is going to see it, but you said that it's just because if it's not there, they do notice it, and that's the thing. It's really interesting.
It's so weird because there was actually a bear. Wasn't there a bear and a gorilla there? There was, wasn't there? There was a bear and a gorilla there, and it was mighty scary acting with a bear and a gorilla, eh, guys?
They weren't real.
They were. They were.
No.
Suit.
Oh, it wasn't.
And there was a real lion there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew just dressed up in a costume.
I love that they actually had a polystyrene one, and I was always writing messages on it, like scratching out messages to Dean Wright, who's if he's watching, then may the gods of Klingon be with you.
This was a big moment. Meeting Aslan was a big moment.
Yeah.
It was, and I think it's really amazing that you guys pull this off, particularly seeing you were just acting to a polystyrene lion.
I feel really out of place now because Will's looking all serious and stony faced and.
But I think that's the thing
sexy.
is you all react differently to Aslan. You all react according to who you are.
Yeah, but Anna's being all serious and sexy, and there I am just and there I am just smiling away. There I am just smiling away. I don't want to be serious and sexy, but I'm just beaming away with this stupid moronic grin on my face.
And there's Patrick being serious and sexy.
Yeah, I think Patrick was the only one in this scene who was maybe trying to be serious and sexy. We all were.
Sir, he's our brother.
I know, dear one. But that only makes the betrayal all the worse. This may be harder than you think.
I loved this location. This was one of my favorite locations. This is a place where I had the privilege of going when there wasn't, 800 people there. And if you walk onto this location, you start to whisper, you start to talk in a hushed voice because it's kind of like it's walking into a natural cathedral almost. And I'm this is a place I would go back to. I really loved it there.
I'm not who you will think I am.
Peter Pevensey, formerly of Finchley. Beaver also mentioned...
Here's a funny thing coming up, though, Will, is this moment of Aslan making a joke was a late addition. I basically decided I wanted to see Aslan in a more relaxed state, kind of, what's Aslan like on a day off kind of thing. And I wanted to get more of a closeness between the two of you by getting a moment of humour. But when we shot this, it was a really serious scene. And I went through every bit of footage we shot, and I found a bit where a fly was buzzing around your head. And that's why you were laughing. Because it was a fly.
It was actually an outtake.
It was an outtake, yeah. And it's just and the other nice thing about it, it's really hard to get William to smile on camera.
Yeah,
that was a completely genuine smile because he was laughing at the fact that the take was blown by this fly buzzing through it.